The week before has just released and it revealed a lot about Phone Guy and gives us a lot of information to chew on. In this video I will break down everything it offers and see what it means for the greater lore. First, I'm gonna give a brief summary of the book and break down the character of Ralph, aka Phone Guy. Ralph is a long-time worker for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This was his dream job, and the animatronics feel like old friends. But now he decides to leave while he still can. This is his final week. He always worked the day shift, but after a sudden staff vacancy and a temporary close, Fazbear's asked him to work the night shift. As a 22-time Employee of the Month, he agrees because he doesn't want to let down Fazbear Entertainment. Ralph has an 11-year-old daughter named Coppelia, who he hopes doesn't work at Freddy's at all. The book tells us that the reason why Ralph worked security is because he thinks the only thing he's good at is protecting or helping others, even if sometimes it is at his own expense. We discover that Ralph also genuinely thinks that the animatronics acting aggressive are because they are glitched, and he doesn't even know that the kids are stuffed into the animatronics. So in the first 3 games, he doesn't really cover up anything. He genuinely believes what he's saying. Of course, he sugarcoats everything, but he doesn't straight up lie, because what he's saying is actually what he believes. We also learn that Ralph is actually nicknamed as the Phone Guy back in the day, because he often leaves phone messages or videos for new employees to help them out in their new job. Alright, on night 1, our objective is to fix the light bulbs in the bathrooms, while surviving Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. If we are successful, the night is over and Ralph goes home to his daughter. He wakes her up and she gets ready for school. Ralph then sleeps all through the day. On night 2, we discover that Bonnie's head fell off from his body, and our task is to repair him, while surviving Chica and Foxy. After we fix Bonnie, we go back to the office. Ralph accidentally falls asleep on the job, but narrowly survives. On night 3, we learn every time Ralph leaves the place, his memories of the night becomes fuzzy and even questions if the animatronics actually tried to kill him, which could explain why the guards we see in-game always return to the job. Or maybe it's just a coping mechanism because he loves the characters and thinks they are just mindless robots. When Ralph checks the cameras, we discover that an intruder broke into the restaurant. The entry point was Party Room 2, which has a window to the outside. We see that one of the tables was overturned and a large pool of blood is on the ground. Ralph is horrified by the amount of blood, but he has a job to do. Our task is to clean up the large pool of blood and board up the broken window. After the night is over, Ralph goes home, but is still traumatized by the blood he saw. Coppelia also tells Ralph that someone called that night, looking for him. They called just as Ralph left home for his 3rd shift. The caller told Coppelia that she will eventually send a message. On night 4, Ralph sees that the lights in the restaurant haven't turned off. When he checks the dining room camera, he sees that the animatronics are having a party and are trashing the dining area. Ralph uses the vents to go to the breaker room and turns off the power so the animatronics can go into night mode. When we do this, the night ends. On the final night, the animatronics are more hostile than before, and we discover that they don't want Ralph to leave. If we narrowly survive the night, we get the normal ending, where Ralph says goodbye to the animatronics and they say goodbye back. But when Ralph leaves, he feels like there's something he missed. To get the canon ending, we must get another ending first. On night 4, if we sneak through the dining area, we hide in Pirate Cove. In there, we discover a nook with a pedestal and an old-fashioned scale. The pans are filled with gold and trinkets. The scales are unbalanced. If we find an item to balance them, we get an old ticket covered in blood, with the words spelling out Fredbear's Family Diner. At the back of the ticket, we see the code 2014, written on it. Then on night 5, when we have the option to call for help, we see that someone had sent a message 5 minutes ago. But to access the message, we need to know the passcode. If we have the ticket, we input 2014. We then get a message from a new character, Bronwen Light. Bronwen Light was once interviewed to be a security guard at Freddy's. Ralph was even the one to interview her, but Fazbear Entertainment rejected her job. Bronwen tells us that she became a junior reporter and tries to discover the mysteries of Freddy's. She discovers, she doesn't tell us how, that a lot of people are in danger, especially Coppelia. She says one of her sources says that the Animatronics are planning something. They have been getting bored doing the same thing every night, so when they discovered that Ralph was leaving, they decided they want to leave too. So they are doing more and more than they used to. They are testing their limits and how far they can go. She then tells us that they have tampered with their charging platforms, and they are giving themselves extra energy so they can travel further. Bronwen begs Ralph to come back tomorrow night and stop the animatronics. He must fix the charging platforms so they can't power up enough to leave. Unfortunately, we learn that Bronwen was caught by Bonnie a few nights ago. She's held as long as she can. We then hear a mechanical roar, and the last words Bronwen says is, "It's me." When we go back home, Ralph decides to take the overtime. On night 6, Ralph goes through the vents and reaches the backstage. He sees that an empty Freddy suit was moved to a different corner of the room, and it smelled bad. The suit itself is of Freddy Fazbear, but the head was an older model from the Fredbear days. If we open the mask, we see Bronwen's body. We also see the phone next to her. We take the phone and we exit the backstage. The animatronics are gone, except for Foxy. He wasn't part of the escape because of his damaged state, but he still helps out anyway. Ralph tampers with the control panel that controls the recharge station and selects a performance. When Ralph looks at the back of the stage, he sees Golden Freddy. Ralph knows not to look away from him, so while the animatronics return because of their programming demanding them to perform, the tampered charging station short-circuits them and they run out of power. Ralph steals a brief glance to the trio, and when he looks at Golden Freddy again, Golden Freddy jump scares him. Golden Freddy holds Ralph's head. Ralph is bombarded by the words, "It's me." Then suddenly, a woman's voice calls out, "It's me." She thanks Ralph for stopping the animatronics, and that Coppelia is safe. Ralph smiles and then goes to sleep. In that ending, the book tells us that we can keep the phone and start again. This time, when we start again, we can use the phone to call up other areas of the restaurant to lure the animatronics, or to know where our bearings are when we get lost in the vents. Ralph also decides to update his recordings for new night guards, and actually help them throughout the night and give them the necessary details. The recordings he makes are the same exact calls from FNaF 1. We learn that Ralph forgot to record a phone call on the 4th night, so he makes the 4th night phone call on night 5. We also learn how the animatronics got him. While he's making his final call, both doors are closed and are being pounded on. Then Freddy, playing his music box, comes through the vent at the back of the office. When he goes into the office, the animatronics scream, all of them. Then the power goes out, and the phone line cuts out. Then Ralph wakes up inside a Freddy suit. He can't move or do anything. All he can do is wait. But because of the animatronic's aggressive behavior lately, he doesn't think the next guard would have a chance to check the backstage and find him. In the end, he dies, and his daughter will never know why he never came home. And that is the true ending. Now, let's get to the secrets. Let's first talk timeline. We learn when Ralph made the first recordings for new security guards, his daughter was just born. Coppelia is 11 by the time of the book, and her birthday is next month, so let's say she's 12. If we assume Ralph was hired in 1983, then this book, and also FNaF 1, take place in 1995, or 1994 at the earliest. And we also learn that the restaurant never reopened in 1988, but was just recently opened when Ralph takes the night shift. Which actually makes a lot of sense, since Ralph did say that when the place reopens, he's gonna take the night shift himself.
When the place eventually opens again, I'll probably take the night shift myself.
So when the location opens, he takes the night shift. So when we play FNaF 1, the place is just recently opened. So the FNaF 1 location most likely reopened in 1995. Speaking of the location, in the book we see the layout is a little different than in the first game. Parts and service is now behind the stage, just like Into the Pit. And there are 2 party rooms off the dining area. One of them is even accessed by an ID card, just like Into the Pit. The party rooms themselves are not used often. They are only needed when there are too many parties booked for the dining area. Our explanation for the differences is that there were new renovations because the company likes to move things around a lot. Ralph thinks it's to confuse the animatronics. We also learned that the location is bigger than it seemed, because some areas are closed off and abandoned. So this could explain the differences between the Into the Pit map and FNaF 1. The location also seems to do very well. In the morning of night 2, we hear that a lot of people have visited the location. Even a reporter is on the scene to see how they were doing. So the FNaF 1 location most likely wasn't a failure. Next up, we learned that the classic versions of the animatronics are what they actually used to look like before FNaF 2, and Ralph describes these posters of the gang as vintage, which means I was right in my video about the UnWithereds' existence. The classics is what the gang actually looked like in 1985, and the Withers are just broken down versions of these guys. Of course, they are stylized to look more broken and scary. Even the FNaF movie uses this logic. The book has a lot of Easter eggs and references to the previous games. It even features a lot of Easter eggs from the first game. The one that sticked out to me the most was when Ralph discovered an old newsletter article about the missing kids, the same one as in the first game. We also get a lot of information about the bite of 87. Firstly, the victim of the bite can't talk anymore, or do anything else, so he can't explain how he provoked the attack. It is also confirmed that the bite happened at the FNaF 2 location, since Ralph mentions how at the time, the survival strategy was bright lights directed into the animatronics' eyes to disorient them and temporarily lock them into place, which is exactly what we hear in FNaF 2.
Those older models would always get disoriented with bright lights. It would cause a system restart or something. Come to think of it, you might want to try that on any room where something undesirable might be. It might hold them in place for a few seconds. That glitch might have carried over to the newer models too.
Post-bite, employees spread tips around the restaurant of how to slow down or stop animatronic attacks. Ralph stopped those rumors, and he was once again given the title Employee of the Month. On night 5, if Ralph puts in the code 1987 on the phone, we hear one of his FNaF 2 calls, specifically the night 5 call, but the call was edited.
Hey, good job, night 5. Keep a close eye on things tonight, okay? We don't have a replacement for your shift yet, but we're working on it. So just get through one more night. Hang in there. Good night.
Which could mean Jeremy was the bite of 87 victim. If that's the case, Jeremy being Cassie's dad, or Jeremy from Help Wanted, is debunked. The book might have also gave us a hint on who did the bite. When Ralph is face to face with Foxy, Ralph says that Foxy is definitely not for kids, which is probably why his attraction is closed. But as far as he knew, Foxy never bit any kids. Notice Ralph only specifically said kids, which heavily implies Foxy did bite an adult, Now, an important part of this book is the usage of the phrase, "It's me." "It's me" being exclusively a Golden Freddy phrase, or a phrase used by Bite Victim, seems less likely now, since in the book every other animatronic says it. So the phrase most likely just means nothing, and is most likely just a spooky ghost phrase. Now I want to talk about the animatronics, because a lot of them do get new characterizations. Like I said in the summary, since Ralph is gonna leave, the animatronics have become more aggressive, and even plan on leaving if Ralph leaves. And in a few of the endings that does happen, and it always results in them going to Ralph's home and taking Coppelia as revenge. Interestingly, in one of the endings, when Freddy goes to Ralph's home, Coppelia sees Freddy as a kid, or at least she doesn't see him as an animatronic, because she refers to Freddy as Ralph's friend, which is like what we see in the movie. But now let's talk about each animatronic individually. Foxy is of course the most ferocious one. A lot of deaths by him just suddenly happen when Ralph doesn't check Pirate Cove, and we learn his attraction is closed for the reopening. We also learn that Ralph is the one who made the out of order sign, which pains him because Foxy is his favorite. If Ralph wears a Freddy mask, Foxy still just sees right through the trick, and he's still sensitive to the flashlight. But on night 5, if we flash him again, Foxy actually is able to handle it. He's either adapted, or he really just wanted to kill Ralph. It's cool seeing that progression from FNaF 2. We learn a lot about Chica. She really cares about Mr. Cupcake. She's even infuriated if Ralph throws the prop away from her. In one of the game over endings, if we escape the building before Chica gets us, Chica literally chases us down outside until she gets you, and she kills Ralph in the forest, thus explaining why Phone Guy says it's dangerous leaving during your shift. One interesting and sad thing we see is when Ralph hides in the kitchen, he sees a regular cupcake with a candle on top. He decides to use it as a distraction. He lights up the candle and hides. When Chica enters, she stares at the lit cupcake. Ralph suddenly has the urge to sing Happy Birthday, despite his discretion. He suddenly sings Happy Birthday, and Chica doesn't do anything. She just stares at the candle. When Ralph got to the name part of the song, a name suddenly pops up into his head. He sings Happy Birthday to Susie. Chica then wails and smashes the cupcake and runs out of the kitchen. This once again reinforces the fact that Susie haunts Chica, which was already confirmed. Now for Bonnie. For one, in 2 of the game overs, he either stuffs a Bonnie head on Ralph, or a spare yellow Freddy. Whether it's actually Golden Freddy or just a spare is unclear, but cool, because it references the old theories of Phone Guy being stuffed into Golden Freddy. Bonnie, like Foxy, also really hates the lights. If Ralph flashes a light on him, he freezes and malfunctions. We also get confirmation that Jeremy is the kid that possesses Bonnie, which was already confirmed again, but you know. There's also something Bonnie does that's important, but I will touch on it in a sec. What we learn about Freddy Fazbear is fucking cool. First off, we learn that the animatronics are somewhat scared of Freddy. The night Freddy moves around for the first time, the animatronics act more slowly or just stay on stage to give Freddy space while exploring the place. And in one instance, Freddy bites down on Mr. Cupcake. Chica then takes the deformed cupcake and runs away, again scared of Freddy. And when Freddy plays his music box, Ralph recognizes the song. Freddy's tune is from the opera Carmen, about a bullfighter. Either Freddy sees himself as a bullfighter, or maybe it's a challenge to the listener to stand up and fight. He can also change the rules of safety poster to the newsletter about the missing kids. What's very weird and interesting is when Ralph sees Freddy in the corner of the hallway, staring at the camera, Ralph stares at the screen and doesn't for 1 second look away, because if he looks away, he thinks he loses. So both of them stare at each other for a very long time. Ralph starts seeing things. He then feels an out-of-body experience. He blacks out briefly, and when he comes to, he is looking at the corner camera. He felt taller, stronger, and colder. He refuses to look away from the camera in fear that he will lose. When he comes back home, he says he hopes his daughter likes the new him. This scene really reminded me of Lonely Freddy, where a mini version of Freddy swapped places with the kid, and Lonely Freddy went to live on as the boy, while the boy was stuck inside the doll. It's very interesting that Freddy himself can do that, or another possibility is maybe Ralph just hallucinated everything, but I very much doubt that. Bronwen Light is an interesting case. We know she's the intruder, and we know she's the person who left Ralph a message before he went to work. But was it really her talking in night 5? Because despite her saying she supposedly survived after the break-in, there is a lot of evidence that this is just not the case. For one, the amount of blood that Ralph finds is too many for her to survive. In one of the routes in night 3, when Ralph checks the backstage camera, we see Bonnie there, and the spare Freddy suit, which was slouching at the corner, is now on the work table. And when we see the suit again, it's in a different spot again, very well signifying that Bronwen was killed that night by Bonnie. That's why we never see him at all for most of the night. And Bronwen knows too much. She supposedly knows the robots have tampered with their power stations. She knows they want to leave, and she knows they want to get Capilia. She knows all of that without explaining how. If she was stuffed on night 3, she would not be able to make that call in night 5. Because when Ralph himself gets stuffed in the Canon ending, he couldn't even move his hands. And again, the large amount of blood loss would have killed her instantly. Which means there's one thing that could explain this. Someone has mimicked her voice. And no, I'm not talking about him, but it could be the next character I discuss, the Golden Freddy. It seems like Golden Freddy was the one actually helping Ralph stop the animatronics. He doesn't even want Ralph and his daughter dead. Giving more credence that Golden Freddy is more aware than the others. What's interesting is that when Golden Freddy speaks, the novel says it's a woman speaking, even though Cassidy is supposed to be a young girl. And just before she jump scares us, the book says Golden Freddy laughs like a mischievous child, which means there is a child in there. So either the writer made a mistake, or Golden Freddy was the one mimicking Bronwen's voice all this time. Even in the message on night 5, Bronwen mistakes Bonnie as Jeremy, because Cassidy knows which kid possesses who, and since she's a part of the group, she would know what the others are planning. All of this fits perfectly if Cassidy was the one who made that call in night 5. So while I think the person who called Capilia just before night 3 was the actual Bronwen, and the intruder was her, Golden Freddy is probably the one who made that message in night 5, while the real Bronwen was killed and stuffed by Bonnie. Golden Freddy having the ability to mimic voices is very odd. It's the same case with Freddy doing the soul swap. Very odd abilities that I'm not sure how it impacts the lore. There's only one last thing left to discuss, and this is a big thing. If Ralph types in 1983 on the phone's passcode, we actually hear the events of the Bite of 83, or as Ralph calls it, the Big Bite. Ralph hears a child crying, and the same exact dialogue from FNaF 4. And when we hear the crunch of Fredbear's mouth, the phone line cuts. But Ralph still hears the sobbing child. He turns around and then... Very, very cool and interesting. Now, who is the one who crushed Ralph's head off? Considering that crying child's crying was still continuing after the phone line cut off, obviously this leads to the conclusion that crying child himself killed Ralph. But of course a ghost can't just bite anyone. Crying child has to have possessed something to kill Ralph. It can't be Foxy, Chica, or Freddy, because just before Ralph puts in the code, he lured them away using the office phone to call up another part of the restaurant. And it can't be Bonnie because he either is lured, blocked by the vent door, or Ralph kicks his head off just as he leaves the vent. That only leaves Fredbear. Since the same sound that describes Fredbear's bite is the same sound that is written in Ralph's death, this highly implies that at least a part of Crying Child's soul is inside Golden Freddy. Since Golden Freddy doesn't want to kill Ralph, it seems Cassidy and Crying Child both inhabit Golden Freddy together and have separate motives. Cassidy is the more nicer and helpful soul, while Crying Child is the vengeful and angry one. One connection I could also think of is fake Bronwen says that one of her sources tells her about the animatronics plan. While this could just be a straight up lie, what if it's sorta true? Cassidy's source was Crying Child. But that was just a fun thought. But is this whole thing actually classic Golden Duo? The theory that Crying Child is normally possessing the suit with Cassidy? Well, I don't think so. Because of FNaF 4 and FNaF World, we know his soul is broken and shattered, and he's not considered a Golden Freddy spirit as late as Help Wanted 2, where only one kid represents Golden Freddy. So I think a part of Crying Child's soul still inhabits the core 4, and this explains how his spirit is broken. But now, after this book, I think a larger chunk of Crying Child's soul is in Golden Freddy, while the others just have a smaller piece. But explaining Crying Child's fate in detail will have to be its own separate video. This has gone long enough. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll see you on the flip side.